What is a title company and what do they do? Let's find out. I'm Sandy Hodkin, a real estate agent with Remax Aerospace in the Cocoa Beach area. Today in our Lunch and Learn, we're going to talk about title companies. What are they? Who pays for them? What do they do? And what part do they play in a transaction for real estate? To help us discuss all these points and questions and answers, I have invited a duo, a mother and son duo, Beth and Frankie from Bella Title, and they are going to help us today answering these questions. So before we get started, Beth and Frankie are going to tell them a little bit about themselves and about their company. It is a family-run company, and Beth is the big cheese, and Frankie is the little weed. Okay, let's get started.
So what's going on? I'm Frank Lavella. This is my mother, Beth. Beth is the owner of Bella Title with my father. Again, we are family-owned. So mom, dad, my sister, me, college roommate. We all work there. We actually just had our 10-year anniversary, and we're in the middle of moving our offices, which is actually super exciting too. So the next time you see us, we'll have an awesome new office, and then I'll let mom tell you more about what we do.
Okay, so we are a title insurance company, and I think Sandy's got some questions about what that actually entails. So we're going to go right to Sandy and let her start with the questions, and hopefully we answer all your questions.
So before we start, so as a realtor, you get a new listing. And so it is part of our job, I think, a lot of agents don't do this, but I think it's part of our job to make sure that whoever says that they are selling the house is in fact the owner of the house. So if Susie Q tells me, hey, I want you to list my home, and then I go on the tax records and Susie Q isn't in fact the owner of the home, I then have some questions. I go back to her and she might say, oh, well, it's my mum's house, or it's my dad's house, or if I've inherited it, it's my inheritance. But she doesn't, I don't know if she's inherited it with siblings or it's just her. And then if it's a situation where a parent has passed, I typically ask for a death certificate. And then I also want to know if they have the right to sign away the house. So I will ask for either a copy of the will or some kind of issue from the probate people or the lawyers. And so I have my sort of ducks in a row, and then I pass all that information on to Bella Title. So I'll get a contract, and eventually we'll get a contract, and then I send everything. Now, if I've asked the questions up front, and then I can send the death certificate, or I can send the probate, or I can send the power of attorney, or whatever with the contract, it makes their life a little easier. Mm-hmm. So once they get the contract, what do you do?
Okay, so what we actually do is we perform a title search. So everything that Sandy just said is absolutely true. We have tons of people who believe that they own the property through either the death of a parent. They also have what they call, quiet quit claim deeds that, well, my friend gave me this property, I really own it, but the deed isn't recorded. So we order a title search. That title search comes back and tells us who owns the property, if there's any mortgage, liens, judgments on the property, and whether or not that property is free and clear to sell at that point. So if, like Sandy had mentioned, a probate, if there is a probate that is active, then we will not be able to sell that property until that probate is complete. Bottom line, like Sandy mentioned, the parties that are selling that property have to be the parties in title. So that's what we do for title insurance.
All right. So then the next question is, who chooses the title company?
A seller-directed county. So the party that pays for the title insurance actually chooses the title insurance company. So again, as you're aware, in a contract, everything is negotiable. Okay, standard Brevard County contract, generally the seller pays for the title insurance. For the owner's policy, the seller directs it. Now, if the buyer wants to pay and it's in the contract, then the buyer gets to direct for the title insurance. So owner's title insurance policy is paid for generally seller, unless the new buyer wants to pay for it in the contract. The loan policy, so if you have a buyer that's getting a lender, loan policy is paid for the buyer all the time, 100%, again, unless it's negotiated in the contract. So person that directs pays.
So if the seller is paying for the title insurance and choosing the title company, how much of what is owed goes to them and how much goes to the buyer?
So you mean for the premiums?
When you go to closing, we have a section that's all about the title, and then we have different amounts. So sometimes the seller pays, sometimes the buyer pays, and it seems to be prorated, in my opinion. It looks different on the title.
Okay.
So how do we work out who pays
Who
for?
pays for what? So again, if your seller's directing, your seller pays for the owner's title insurance policy. The state of Florida is a promulgated rate state. That means that the state sets our rates for title insurance. So we take the purchase price, we look it up in a book, and that's what the actual owner's policy is. Now, the prorated part that you're speaking about is most likely the lender's policy. So the lender's policy is issued at a simultaneous issue, which is much lower rate than the owner's policy. And that's what the buyer actually picks up. So the buyer will pick up the lender's policy, a closing fee in order to close that, as well as any endorsements that are required by the buyer's lender. So owner's policy paid for the party that's directing it. Lender's policy is paid for the buyer if there is indeed a lender on it.
So our next question is why do we need title insurance? Why can't I just say I've owned this house for 20 years and you just believe me?
Because most people, like you mentioned earlier, are not always honest. So once we do a title search, we find out who the proper owners are of that property. The other thing is we find out what encumbers that property, liens, judgments, mortgages, anything of that sort. The main thing, like a lot of people will take out, they'll do some repairs on the house, so they'll put a new roof. A notice of commencement is actually filed, but people don't realize that needs to be terminated at closing time. They don't realize that it actually attaches to their property. So the roofer will go down to the county, ask for a permit, they record a notice of commencement that actually reserves a lien position in the event that the roofer is not paid on the property. So these are the kind of things that we find through the title search, and we may find some open permits on the property. So then we would go back to the listing agent and let the agent know that we've got some open permits. Maybe they had an AC put in and the final inspection never came through. So Sandy would then go back to the city, work with them to get the permit closed. So title insurance is very important when purchasing or selling a property, so that the buyer are aware that you're the only lien on that property. If you have a mortgage, you're the only owner of that property, and nobody can come back and say, hey, I have any type of an interest in this property.
And I'm just going to say that with the permits, a lot of times the company do not close out the permits. I've just had a fence put, a seawall put up, and we've just had to, it's been a month now since it's been done, and I never got the close of the permit. So I know to ask for the closing of the permit, but a lot of people don't. Now we have a grandfather clause in Cocoa Beach and Brevard area that if the permit is more than 7 years old, we're going to grandfather it in as closed, so that we can in fact move on and sell the property.
So the nice thing about title insurance is that it is a one-time fee, and it is relatively cheap for what you are getting out of title insurance. To know that you are the sole owner of the property, to know that there are no liens, there are no nothing like that, it is very reasonable.
And then also, just so you know, that if you happen to sell your house, you buy a house and then within 3 years you sell it because you have to move, or we have a lot of military personnel here, and they do often have to go back to another space or another place. If it's under 3 years, then you do get partial credit back.
Yes, it's called a reissue credit that is actually issued by the state of Florida. So in the event that you've owned your home for less than 3 years and you do sell it, you give us your prior owner's policy, or we will research it for you, and you get a full reissue credit based on the purchase price that you actually purchased for. Same thing if you're going to refinance, that owner's policy will come into play, and you'll get a reissue credit if you refinance anytime that you own the property.
Okay, so then one of the other questions that I get asked a lot is the closing costs. So who determines the closing costs, and how does that work on the final HUD? Okay,
so the closing costs, again, are pursuant to the terms of the contract. When you come in and you give us your contract, we read the entire contract to make sure, is it the standard verbiage in the contract where the seller is paying for the doc stamps on the deed, the seller is paying for the owner's policy, or is there something in there that changed that? So we would go through the entire contract, start it, with the agent's commission. Who's paying commission? Are there any type of transaction fees to the buyer or the seller from the agent? Title insurance, doc stamps on the deed. Both parties will have a closing fee. So the seller will have a closing fee. The buyer will have a closing fee. The seller generally also pays for the title insurance search. They also pay for the title insurance, as we had discussed. They pay for doc stamps on the deed. They pay for any searches that are needed. So city lien search, find out if there's any permits or any open water bills on the property. Estoppel fees, if there's an HOA, estoppel fees are generally charged by every HOA. So you got 2 or 3 HOAs on there, you've got 2 or 3 estoppel fees. So basically, we follow the exact terms of the contract as far as anything that is prepaid or owed by the seller, taxes, outstanding HOAs. Most of those are prorated from the date of closing. So if your seller has prepaid the homeowners association for 2 years, say, then we go ahead and prorate it from the buyer back to the seller. So generally, right off the terms of the contract, that's what I'm saying earlier, everything is negotiable. Anything that those parties agree to goes into the terms of the contract, and we as a title company put it on the HUD.
You mentioned dock stamps. So if you are from up north, they don't call it dock stamps. So explain to us what are the dock stamps.
So dock stamps go directly to the state of Florida, and they are actually calculated on the purchase price. So we don't have a state tax here in the state of Florida. We all know that when we file our income tax, there's no state tax. So they do charge every single transaction a dock stamp fee, and that actually goes directly to the county. I was told in the past that it helped fix, the roads. Not quite sure where it actually goes because they would mention something about potholes. Don't see a lot of potholes, but if they are there, they're being fixed by the dock stamps accordingly. So
Okay, so again, if you're from up north, you go to an attorney to do your closings. So what is the difference between you and an attorney?
So title insurance is actually governed by the state that you are purchasing or selling in as to whether or not you are agency directed. So Bella Title is a title insurance agent, and then there's attorneys that also can do title insurance as well. We are not an attorney state, which means that as a title insurance agent, I can perform the entire closing for you. I can do the title search, we do the closing, we do the recording, we do the dispersing. The difference is I have underwriters that have full staffs of attorneys. So any question that you may have, we go directly back to our underwriter. Our underwriter actually insures the property. So I'm the title agent writing your title insurance. Say Westcor is one of our underwriters. They're the ones that are insuring your policy. Just like when you get a general policy, homeowners insurance policy, you might have, somebody that's out there via insurance possibly issuing it, but they have underwriters that insure it. So we go back to our underwriting attorneys and we ask them the questions that you may have regarding legal entities that, so we can answer the same questions as an attorney. We just do it through a third party attorney.
Does that mean that you're cheaper?
So we do not charge an attorney fee. So we charge a promulgated rate pursuant to the state of Florida and a closing fee. We do not have an attorney fee. It is important to know because a lot of people that come from up north have the concerns that they need an attorney involved. In the state of Florida, you do not need an attorney involved. Bella Title would be an independent third party that is closing the transaction. We do not represent the buyer nor the seller. We issue title insurance. So if you have a conflict between the buyer or the seller that isn't going to be resolved through, say, the agent's help, then we can interplead and we can go to our underwriters and say, hey, we have this situation. What can we possibly do? So generally, I've been doing this for 35 years and I have never had, knock on wood, a file that I couldn't get to the closing table because of some type of problem within the file.
And that's what's important. So I know that the seller gets to choose their title company,
Yes.
typically, but obviously as a realtor, I advise them as to which one I think works best.
Right.
And I try to always use local companies. I do local insurance companies, local mortgage companies, because they know our area. And
Correct.
that's what's the most important thing, because you know that if there's any kind of issues, we need to be able to close within the 15, 20 days, 30 days, depending on what kind of contract we have.
Correct.
We would want to know that if we have a cash deal, that we can close in 10 days.
Right.
If we have a VA, we would like to know that we can close in 28 days. So it's important for everybody, and that's why we like to use our local partners, and we like to work as a team.
Absolutely.
And that's what gets us to the closing table, and that's what we
So-
need to do. We don't want to have any files that are left open.
Right.
That doesn't work for anybody.
And that's the other thing. So Sandy, our relationship is with you. We build a relationship with the buyer and the seller once we actually contact them, but we don't want to let you down. You have trust in us. Your clients have trust in you. So we're not going to do anything to let you down. So you talk about a 10-day closing, right? Our answer is always yes. Can you close this? Yes, as long as we have the homeowners association to stop back. Can this close in 12 days? Yes, as long as we have clear title. So our answer is always going to be yes, as long as the items that we need from the third party come in. If you say, can you close this in 12 days? We can say yes, but then we find out that your seller doesn't really own the property. That might be a little bit of a delay. So title insurance is very, very interesting. That's why I've been doing it forever. And every single day, I still say that I learned something new. Right now, the market got really, really extremely busy and people are trying to move things along quickly. We were very happy the last 2 years to be a part of that, but there were times when we had to step in, be the messenger and say, sorry, but your seller doesn't own this property, or your seller has additional mortgages that he's not aware of, liens, judgments. We have spouses all the time that may be overseas that we need, them to join on the docs, and they're not always available. So we work with you and with your clients to get to that to the table as quickly as possible, because that's why we're all here. We're here to close the transactions.
Just Bella Title also does kind of an unusual thing. They will actually do a closing anywhere you want. So they'll do it in the house, in the house that you're selling or buying. They can do it at my office. They can do it at their office.
You do it at Coconuts.
We can do it at
the restaurant.
Yes.
So this is a few months ago, we had a situation where the buyers had bought the house, but there was a delay. So the sellers had packed up and they'd gone back to Pennsylvania. Once they were in Pennsylvania, the poor wife, she ended up getting COVID. We had to do the closing in the intensive care unit, so that so we could prove that she was still alive and that we could actually close on time. So they have partners all over, and they got a title person going out to the hospital, and that's what we ended up doing. So it's a team effort, and we all try to do everything that we can. Absolutely. So I hope that our Lunch and Learn has helped you and given you a lot of food for thought.
Did you eat?
I didn't eat
yet. Where's this lunch at?
Well,
Where's this lunch at?
Lunch is always after our learning session.
Hope you ate.
Please subscribe, ring the bell, and we hope that we will see you soon. Bye from me.
Yeah, bye. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you soon.